The rain came down in heavy sheets that evening, pounding against the windshield of Jake Miller's old pickup truck. Jake, a small-town mechanic in rural Kentucky, had just finished a long day at his garage. Most nights, he drove the same route home along the county highway, but the storm had caused flooding, forcing him onto the narrow backroads that wound through farmland and abandoned properties. As his headlights cut through the rain, Jake thought about his modest life. He wasn't wealthy, but he was proud of what he had built with his own two hands. His shop kept the town's trucks, tractors, and cars running. People knew him as dependable, the kind of man who would never turn down someone in need. Then, just as he passed an old, collapsing barn on the edge of Miller's Creek, something strange caught his ear. At first, he thought it was the wind. But then he heard it again, a faint, desperate cry for help. Jake slowed the truck and leaned closer to the window. The cries were muffled, but they were real. He pulled over, grabbed his flashlight from under the seat, and stepped out into the downpour. The mud squelched under his boots as he made his way toward the barn. The wooden doors creaked loudly as he pushed them open, the beam of his flashlight sweeping across the dusty interior. At first, all he saw were broken tools, rusted farm equipment, and piles of ice. But then, in the far corner, his light froze on something that made his stomach drop. There, chained to a wooden beam, sat a young woman. Her clothes, expensive once, were torn and filthy, her wrists bruised from the heavy iron shackles. She looked weak, shivering from the cold, her face pale and streaked with tears. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake's heart pounded. He rushed over, kneeling beside her. "It's okay, you're safe now. I'll get you out of here." As he studied her face, recognition struck him. He had seen her photo on the news just last week. She was Rebecca Harrington, the daughter of one of the richest men in America. She had been missing for days, and her disappearance had been making national headlines. No one knew where she was, or if she was even alive. And now here she was, locked in a forgotten barn on the backroads of Kentucky. Jake's mind raced. Whoever had done this could still be nearby. But there was no time to waste. He pulled the wrench from his back pocket, the same one he used at the garage, and examined the chains. The locks were old, rusted, but solid. He set his jaw. "Hang tight," he said fiercely. "I'll get you out of here." The storm outside raged on, but inside that dark barn, Jake Miller knew his life had just changed forever. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore, he was the only person standing between a billionaire's daughter and the danger that had stolen her freedom. Jake's hands worked quickly, his wrench clanking against the rusty chains as Rebecca shivered in fear. Every strike echoed through the hollow barn, and with each sound, he worried someone might hear. Whoever had locked her here couldn't be far. "Please, hurry," Rebecca whispered, her voice trembling. "I've got you," Jake reassured, his voice steady though his heart pounded in his chest. Finally, with one last twist, the old lock snapped. The chain clattered to the floor, and Rebecca collapsed forward into Jake's arms. She was weak, but alive. Jake took off his warm flannel jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "We have to get you out of here," he said. He helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight as they stumbled through the rain back toward his truck. But just as they reached the door, headlights flared in the distance. A black SUV screeched into the driveway, tires spitting gravel. Jake's gut tightened. He had been right. The kidnappers were coming back. "Get down," Jake whispered sharply, pulling Rebecca behind a stack of eyeballs near the barn door. The SUV door slammed, and two men stepped out, their voices harsh as they argued. "She's not going anywhere. Harrington will pay double if we keep her longer," one said. Jake clenched his fists. He knew he couldn't fight them head-on. He needed a plan. He turned to Rebecca. "Stay low. Don't move until I tell you." Then, using the cover of the storm, Jake slipped along the barn wall toward his truck. He quietly opened the passenger door, grabbed a crowbar from his toolbox, and crouched behind a tractor. When one of the men walked inside to check on Rebecca, Jake moved fast. With a swift swing, he struck the other man's legs, knocking him to the ground. The dog roared in pain, but Jake pressed the crowbar against his throat. "Try anything, and you won't get back up," Jake growled. Inside, Rebecca screamed as the second kidnapper grabbed her arm. Jake bolted into the barn, his boots pounding on the wooden floor. He didn't hesitate. He slammed the crowbar across the man's back, sending him sprawling to the ground. "Come on," Jake urged, grabbing Rebecca's hand. They sprinted through the rain, climbed into his truck, and Jake jammed the keys into the ignition. The old engine roared to life just as the kidnappers stumbled out, shooting and firing shots into the night. Bullets pinged off the truck's frame as Jake swerved onto the muddy road, tears spinning before gripping the pavement. Rebecca clung to him, shaking, her tears mixing with the rain dripping from her hair. "You saved me," she whispered. Jake's jaw tightened as he pressed the gas. "I just did what anyone would have done." But Rebecca shook her head. "No, no one else came. You're the only one who stopped." By the time they reached the sheriff's office in town, the storm had begun to fade. Rebecca was quickly surrounded by deputies, who radioed the FBI and called her father. Jake stood quietly off to the side, exhausted and soaked, his clothes covered in mud and grease. Moments later, a sleek helicopter landed in a nearby field. A powerful man stepped out, Richard Harrington, Rebecca's father. The billionaire ran to his daughter, tears streaming down his face as he embraced her. Then Rebecca turned and pointed at Jake. "Dad," she said fiercely, "he's the man who saved my life." Harrington walked up to Jake, studying the humble mechanic with gratitude in his eyes. "You didn't just save my daughter," he said. "You saved me, too. Whatever you want, it's yours." Jake simply shook his head. "I don't need anything. Just make sure she's safe." For the first time in years, Rebecca smiled, a smile that would change Jake's life in ways he could never have imagined. That night, in the middle of a small Kentucky town, a simple mechanic had become a hero.